Now, lots of other things to talk about as well on the show today, obviously. When lockdown was imposed, it's perhaps no surprise that researchers found that a quarter of us were drinking more. Maybe the odd pint here and there is, neither here nor there. Not much of an issue, is it? But what if you're an addict? What if you're trying to cope with being in lockdown and being dependent on alcohol at the same time? And what about the loved ones that this affects? The loved ones that the alcoholic person is living with. And that's what we're talking about. One of the subjects we're talking about on the programme today. If this is ringing bells with you, I would love to hear from you. Is it something that has affected you over the past few months, that you're drinking a lot more? Perhaps you actually yourself live with somebody who is themselves an alcoholic. Well, I've been talking to Susan, we're calling her Susan, from South Essex, about living with her partner, who is an alcoholic. And I asked her what effect alcohol has on her partner.
It's literally Jekyll and Hyde. He is a very kind, generous, loyal, funny, loving man when he doesn't drink. However, when he drinks, as soon as he picks up a drink, and it happens from the first drink, his personality is the absolute opposite. He's never physically violent towards me, but he can be mentally very abusive. He can be very destructive of his surroundings, and he will keep drinking until he actually starts to vomit, at which point he can't obviously drink. When I say he'll keep drinking till he starts to vomit, I mean over a period of weeks. He will start slow and then increase, and the drinking ramps up from perhaps a bottle of wine a day to 6 bottles of wine a day, if not more. And then we end up with the paramedics coming, and he ends up going into hospital and is generally admitted. The last time he went to hospital, he was actually in what they call hydration resus, because he was so dehydrated and his liver was damaged, his kidneys were damaged, etc. When he came home, he didn't drink, and that lasted for about a month and a half, and then he started drinking again. And he has no control over that. So I have to have compassion for the illness, really, because I know he's a good man, so I know he wouldn't choose to do this if it was a choice.
What's it been like during lockdown?
Well, the shops are still open and alcohol is still available. So we had a period of 3 weeks at the beginning of lockdown where he drank excessively. Then we had a break. We had a little sobriety, and now we're back to drinking again. So it's very much a case of distancing myself both physically and mentally when he is drinking. So I'm able to go in the conservatory and shut the door and watch stuff on the internet, read books, use headphones to block out the noise, and just make sure that he is safe. So I ensure that when he passes out, I put him in the recovery position. I make sure that he's not near any sharp objects, that kind of thing. It is as basic as looking after a toddler, really, when he's entirely inebriated. I'm very lucky. I have support from AA's sister group, which is Al-Anon, probably one of the world's best kept secrets, because it has changed my life. I am able to live with my alcoholic, knowing that it's a disease and knowing that I have choices now. So I'm here because I choose to be, because I love the man and I want him to be safe, and I obviously hope that one day he will find recovery. But in the meantime, I have my own recovery. So I have the Al-Anon program, which enables me to treat his disease with compassion, but also ensuring that I look after myself and put myself first.
Susan, how long has this been going on?
We'll have been together for 19 years this year. When we first got together, I drank as well, not excessively, but I enjoyed a drink when we first met.
Yeah.
And gradually the party ended earlier and earlier in the evening for me and went on later and later in the evening for him. And I turned into a safety net, really, a carer. And I was at my wit's end. I was desperate to find some sort of help and stop him drinking. And I rang AA and spoke to a very kind person who explained that alcoholics that want to get into recovery have to want it for themselves, and that nobody else can do it for them. However, there was an organisation called Al-Anon. So he gave me the telephone number and I rang Al-Anon. And this extremely kind, patient lady at the other end of the phone listened to me and then suggested that I get myself to an Al-Anon meeting.
What steps has he taken himself? Because as you say, if an alcoholic, doesn't really want to stop being an alcoholic, they'll continue, whatever help they get. But what help has he asked for? Or hasn't he asked for help?
He has asked for help at times. I have had an AA member come and talk to him, actually the last time he was in hospital.
Right.
When he enters a period of sobriety, he wouldn't dream of picking up a drink. He is pretty good, actually.
Do you know what triggers it again? Do you know what triggers it?
Well, the sky is blue, the grass is green. Sometimes there is a reason and sometimes there isn't. There is a sort of common saying in AA that when somebody relapses, which is kind of what he's turning into, a serial relapser, they press a button. Literally, it's the I don't care button, but they use a different phrase. And it's pressing the I don't care button and off they go. And it's not even about thinking. There's no thought process as to why I'm about to have this drink. It's just, I want this drink. I'm going to pick up this drink. And, because it's not just a physical illness, it's a mental and spiritual illness as well. Yeah. So most alcoholics drink to make them feel better. And ironically, of course, it doesn't make them feel better. But the alcoholism in the brain is still telling them that it does.
I asked her, given the effects it's had on her partner's mental health, whether she'd ever considered getting him sectioned.
Very frequently, yeah. Normally at the end of these bouts, I'm at the point where I wish somebody would section him. And actually, it's not that straightforward. It's very hard to get somebody sectioned. Yes. Ironically, if he was on illegal drugs, he would be sectioned very quickly. But because alcohol is a legal drug, he would have to be looking to harm himself in a very public way, like the peer or threatening suicide, before they would even contemplate sectioning him.
During this period of coronavirus, how much worse has it been for you? Because I'm assuming that you've been locked down together.
We have, yeah. I think the hardest thing for me, although when you're in Al-Anon, you are never alone, the support that you have from going to the rooms and being able to get a hug from somebody, that contact and that camaraderie, and the fact that when you're in a room with somebody, you can read their body language, despite the fact that Zoom meetings are better than nothing and wonderful that we can see each other's faces, it's the missing of the physical contact from other people, because it's very isolating living with an alcoholic. You're just not going to take them anywhere at all, ever, because the embarrassment factor and the alienation that you experience when you're with somebody who is drinking alcoholically is an exception to the social rule. And I don't blame people. I wouldn't want to be in a room with somebody that was being, very drunk.
Susan, a lot of people would say to you, leave him. Just however much you love him, leave him. What would you say to that?
Believe me, I would have said the same thing before living with an alcoholic, definitely. But for me, it's my choice. Just because he is ill doesn't mean I should leave. If he had dementia or Parkinson's or any other mental health issue, nobody would expect me to leave. People would expect me to look after him. So my answer to the people that say, why don't you just leave? And my family, some of my family have said that. And I have made that decision time and time again, actually. I have thought I would leave. However, when sober, he is a totally different man. And I will take the moments that are sober because, he is the love of my life. And I wouldn't walk away from him if he had Parkinson's or dementia or Alzheimer's. I wouldn't do that. And this is a mental health issue that needs to be treated very differently than it currently is in the UK.
Susan, what does he say to you about it? Because when he starts drinking again, when he goes off the wagon and starts drinking again, you must say to him, what are you doing? I mean, what does he say to you?
He says he can't help it. I mean, I don't get in the ring with my alcoholic, so I'm not going to argue with him when he's drinking, because there is no point. Having said that, when he is thoroughly depressed at the end of the night, which he often is because alcohol is a depressant, he will say, I don't want to be like this. I don't know why I do this. I wish I could stop. But when in the madness, as we call it, in the insanity, they just can't do it on their own. Alcoholism is one of those addictions where they need the support and help of a recovery program. I mean, it's quite interesting, actually, because often alcoholics that I know that are in recovery talk about alcoholism being an allergy. So they just will not drink any alcohol in any shape or form, be that mouthwash, cough medicine, whatever, because as soon as it's in their system, it fires off the synapses in the brain that create the issues. So I think it is an allergy because, if you ingest a substance that affects you differently from most people, then there must be some sort of allergic reaction there. I mean, clearly, I've lived with it for a long time and I have thought about it a lot and done lots of reading, etc. So he doesn't like being an alcoholic at all. And he's very much in denial when he's drinking. But when sober, he knows he can't drink. So it's that literal I don't care button that gets pressed that turns him from being a sober person to somebody drinking.
What about the alcoholics themselves? Well, Joseph is from Uttlesford. Let's talk to Joseph to start with. Joseph, good morning.
Good morning, Dave.
Tell us your experiences.
My experiences of alcoholism and drug addiction was started from a very young age. Became a problem in my late teens. I was dependently drinking. By the age of 21, I had my first detox and started into the services, the Essex Drug and Alcohol Services then.
At 21? Wow.
Yeah, 21, yeah. I was quite early. I knew I had a problem, but it was a culture. I was young. I didn't really know what to do with myself. I tried. I was in denial. And that continued through drinking drug addiction until the age of 31 when eventually I got my first taste of recovery.
31? And what? Because, I've got friends who are alcoholics and for them, I had long discussions with them over the years, and it was trying to get them to actually acknowledge that they've got a problem. What actually tipped you into that?
Well, after my first stint in treatment, I started having seizures just before that, and I was diagnosed with a condition called cerebral ataxia, which is a scarring at the back of the brain, which affects the cerebral cortex, which is the part that sends all the messages from your brain down your spine into the rest of your body. So that was causing me to have seizures and I couldn't walk, basically. So when I've come out of treatment that first time, I then changed none of my lifestyle and ended up relapsing. I relapsed worse than before. So that took me to a space of isolating in my flat for approximately 2 years, drinking alone with only the Tesco man. And I was addicted to painkillers then as well, and the chemist dropping the painkillers around. And I was having daily seizures. I was crawling around my flat, pulling myself around my flat. It was horrendous. And it was like I was living in basically my own addictive prison.
What got you out of it?
Well, I was on my hands and knees praying every day, just, can you please help me with this? And my family was at their wits' end, trying to get me help, because I had doctors coming round and they said, if we don't get this man help, he will die. He's dying. My liver function was in nearly over the thousands, which is normally supposed to be between 40 and 100 or something like that. Right. Luckily, my stepfather got me into, or the Open Road started coming round, and they assessed me, and STARS, the clinical team, got me into a treatment centre, or a detox centre in Elephant Castle, which they gave me a 10-day detox, and I was in a wheelchair by then, and couldn't walk, around the detox centre. And after that, luckily I came out and I was walking with walking sticks, but it was quite a long process.
What age were you when you were in the wheelchair, Joseph?
I was 31.
In a wheelchair?
Yeah, in a wheelchair for my alcohol. If I picked up, when I relapsed, and then I was going through AA and things before, as soon as I pick up, I'd be straight in hospital with a seizure and not being able to walk again. My whole of my function of my body would just literally go. You know, I couldn't be able to do nothing.
How are you now?
Now I'm okay. I mean, a lot of because of the damage that I've caused is permanent, constant. I do get quite a lot of confusion sometimes. I'm in a chronic pain because the nerve endings have all been severed. It's like I'm been dipped in lava and been left to dry,
Right.
sort of thing. So there's a constant burning across the whole of my body. But
A lot of
in saying that, I'm in recovery, so I'm grateful for everything I've got.
right, and a lot of young people will, you know, they'll get together, peer group, as you said earlier on, peer group saying, come on, let's have a drink, come on, you know, age of 13, 14, 15, whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a bit of a laugh, isn't it? Come on, let's have another drink, let's have another drink. You know, parents won't know and all that sort of thing. What would your message to those young people be?
The message was, for me is, please be careful, please, you know, drink responsibly. If you can, we don't know until we start drinking or taking drugs whether we could have this addictive personality or not. To be mindful, and if you do feel you've got developing a problem, please seek help straight away. There's plenty of services out there. There's Open Road, there's Futures in Mind, Phoenix Futures. There's a lot of treatment out there, and there's AA, NA, and CA fellowships. What
happened to you?
About 4 years ago, I had a good life. I had so much of my life was really good, and I lived in London. But I had a series of fairly rubbish jobs, and I decided to, rather than walk away, rather than ask for help, I actually decided to have a bit of Dutch courage. To get me through the day, you know, to get me through, just to get me out of the house, to get me on the bus, to get me to work, to get me through the shift. And ultimately, a couple of years later, it took me to where you'd have said, oh, what are you going to do? What decision are you going to make? I would have said, well, I'm going to sit here and I'm going to drink and I'm going to wait for the undertaker. So within a couple of years, I was waiting for death. I was going to die. Yes.
You were going to die. Were you determined you were going to die? Were you?
I think when I was in this very room where I am now in Chelmsford, and I sat here and I couldn't make a decision other than I will drink and I will wait for death. Yes.
And it was the job. It was the sort of boredom, I suppose, of the job, was it? No,
it was really a fantastic job. I worked in Ken. I love the work, but the you know, so much, I suppose, in current climate is that it's really, really hard work, like staffing, and it was really, really hard. And I instead of sort of putting my hand up and saying I'm struggling and walking away, I thought I'll have a drink. And I made that decision as a grown man, you know, knowing, and that's the route I chose.
I tell you what, mate. So many people do that, don't they? You know, life gets a bit tricky, and you think, well, what can I do to anaesthetise myself a little bit? I'll have a drink. I'll have another drink. I'll have another drink. It's so easy. It's so easy to do that, isn't it? Really.
Absolutely.
What got you recovering then? What got you into doing something about it?
And I'm 863 days sober today. So I mean, after I had a detox at Broomfield.
Right.
For 5 days, which was hellish, and it stops the sort of physical cravings. And I thought after that, I was Superman. I thought I could do anything, but I didn't have any aftercare really, and I had quite a few health problems that are related to the alcohol use. And I eventually, and I can't remember if it was like a month or so, I sort of struggled and I stalked the drink, and then I thought I'll have a sniff. Then I thought I'll have a sip, and then, you know what, before you know it, I sort of had a relapse, a massive relapse,
right?
Which takes you back. You don't get the time back that you had getting, you know, to my sort of rock bottom. It's sort of all upon you really quickly.
And you start again, don't you?
Yes, you get completely back to sort of, you know, ground zero, and it was, and then I had to go. I went back to hospital. They sort of gave me some medicine, and I spoke to a fantastic chap there who, as the alcohol liaison, and I started a reduction program straight away. Immediately, I went from like sort of 2.5 liters of vodka a day to 2.5 bottles of wine a day. and I reduced over, let me think, let's say from October to 6th of February sort of 2018 when I last had a drink. I reduced slowly, so I didn't suffer any sort of like side effects or come downs or any of that. And I did and it worked. Yeah. And then after that, I was using Open Road, obviously, in future. Open Road, fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Yeah.
And then after that, I went to rehab for 2 months with Action on Addiction at Sharp in Wickford.
What a pleasure to talk to you as well, Mark. Thank you very much indeed. Mark from Chelmsford. See, if this is in your family at the moment, if this is ringing bells with you, you're not alone. Let me just read you a text I got earlier on. I am in Al-Anon. Now, this is for the partners of people who are alcoholic. I'm separated from my wife as I can no longer live with alcoholism. Yes, it's an illness, but there is a program of recovery for it, as there is for many major illnesses. Living with other illnesses don't tend to result in physical, emotional and verbal abuse of loved ones, and Al-Anon has shown me that I have a right to draw boundaries and get on with my life. To that person, that gentleman there whose wife was alcoholic, I have a very old friend whose first wife was also alcoholic, and he said exactly the same words to me, that he just couldn't stand it anymore. So absolutely get that. But what about you? If you're an alcoholic yourself, or you're living with somebody who is alcoholic, what's it like for you? First of all, Jenny is in wherever Jenny is. Jenny, good afternoon. Thank you for coming on. Tell me about your family.
Well, it's my daughter, actually.
Right.
She's been evicted twice because of her alcoholism. What the problem is she's in denial, and she doesn't think she's got an alcohol problem.
Right.
But she's very verbally abusive, and she's vehement. The language is foul, and I've been going through absolute hell, and now it's violence. And on the first occasion, I did call an ambulance, not for me, for her, and they said unless she agrees to go anywhere, there was nothing they could do for her. Yeah. I've had 4 assaults since then, the last one being a couple of weeks ago, where it really was punching, and I've had a bruised jaw, bruised eye, and so I called the police rather than the ambulance, because
Yes.
I was worried about my life then. And I know it's an illness, and I know she can't help it, but we're talking about somebody who's over 40, and I'm an old age pensioner, and now I find that some of my family support really is not there anymore, and I'm just don't really know what to do now. So she doesn't live with me anymore. The police have taken her away, but I can't explain to people how bad it is. It's you wake up every morning hoping it's not going to be as bad as it was yesterday, but unfortunately it's worse the next day.
And do you know what sets her off on the alcohol again? Has she tried to come off it?
No, she's in denial. She doesn't.
She's completely in denial, is she?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she doesn't. I mean, there must be some mental health issues as well, but she's in denial about that as well. And everything that's ever gone wrong in her life is all my fault. So I'm the one. She's lost friends. She's made enemies, and everything. She's got no one else to blame. So obviously it's going to be me. So everything is my fault because she feels that I've made the wrong choices with her. And I've had her living with me. I've been kindness itself. I've fed her. I do her washing. I cook for her. She doesn't. There's no financial support as well because she doesn't work.
Right.
And I'm really at the end of my tether. I'm close to. Well, I'm in tearful every day, to be truthful. So, and now that I've got finding that people think I'm lying, and I'm not lying, and I'm finding it hard to cope, to be truthful. Yeah.
And very often, Jenny, the alcoholic themselves, they're very, very manipulative. So
Yes.
don't worry about everybody blaming you, because that's a sort of standard thing. They're very, very manipulative. Have you tried Al-Anon? Because this is specifically for people who are connected, families of alcoholics. Have you tried to get in touch with them?
Well, I did, but because of lockdown, I can't go. I also had an appointment booked with a counsellor to help me.
Yeah.
Again, because of lockdown, that was cancelled as well. So I've been sort of floating around with no help, basically.
Absolutely. I see what
yeah,
you mean.
and so the other side, yes, I feel sorry for her. I'm sure she doesn't want to be an alcoholic. She's my daughter and I love her, but I can't take any more of it. And then, of course, once the violence started, that was it. And now I'm regretting I probably should have called an ambulance rather than the police. But at the time, I was fearing for my life. So I didn't know if that probably was the wrong thing. I don't know. I don't know really.
I think the problem is, Jenny, that what very often happens, I believe, is that people in your position, you'll suddenly start then feeling guilty about what you've done. You shouldn't have phoned the police. You'll start regretting this and so on. Did I make the right decision and so on? So you're not alone on that. So if those feelings start coming, don't worry about them, because they are, I think, quite standard things. You phoned their helpline, have you? The Al-Anon helpline?
This was about, crikey, that's 4 months ago. And
why don't you? Well, can I just make a suggestion that you give them a ring? Because very often these counselling organisations are doing it. I don't know if you've got a computer. Have you? Do you use a computer at all?
I've got an iPad similar, so that would be okay.
So you'd be okay. Well, let me give you their telephone number and their website address, and if you give them a ring.
Yeah.
Say you've been on the radio and you've been talking about it, and I'm sure they would be able to at least point you in the right direction. Maybe do a Zoom call with you or something like that, and just give you a bit of a helping hand. Their telephone number is 0800.
0800, yeah.
0086.
0086.
811.
811. Yes, it is. There is guilt there. I'm actually asking the police to drop the charges.
Yeah, but don't worry, because that's don't start doubting yourself, and don't start punishing yourself, because that won't you haven't done anything wrong.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. I thought there might be someone out there who's going through exactly the same thing, and unfortunately, my grandchildren are now teenagers and more have turned against me as well. So, and I love them all to bits, and unfortunately, they're not seeing my side of it at all. So,
well, give them a ring at Al-Anon, because obviously I'm not qualified to give any advice, but I would the only advice I would give you is to phone Al-Anon, and they are professionals. They know what they're talking about, and they'll take you through it. Jenny, thank you very much. And Jenny saying, I just wonder if there are other people out there who are going through the same things themselves. I would lay huge amounts of money that there are. If you're one of them and would like to come on and just give a bit of advice from your experiences to Jenny, then please feel free. Maureen is with us now. Maureen, tell me about your situation.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I lived with my husband, who was alcoholic. As you said, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. But we met when we were in our 20s, early 20s. And it was during the 60s, and everybody drank and we partied and things like that. And we were together for 20 years during his alcoholism. And I didn't really know what was going on at all. I didn't recognise alcoholism. His drinking became worse and worse. And as time went by, we got married and had 2 children. And during that time, I didn't realise how much I had been affected by his behaviour. The drinking was getting worse and worse, and I now know, because I do go to Al-Anon, that alcoholism is a progressive illness. It gets worse until it's stopped. And it's a very, very prevalent thing to actually live with, as I've learned, because I go to Al-Anon now. But I didn't want to go to Al-Anon, and it wasn't my choice. But I thought my husband was going to die because it was, time had gone on, and he hadn't stopped drinking. His behaviour was worse and worse. He was never physically... it was never a physical thing. No. He never hit us or anything like that. But it was just being with him. It was a lonely and isolating experience because I had 3 children instead of 2, and he was my third, and he was getting worse and worse. And I tried everything to stop him drinking, but nothing worked. And, I'm not the sort of person that gives in easily, but in so doing, trying to stop him drinking, I became very, very ill myself. And now I know that alcoholism is a family illness. You can't live with an alcoholic without being affected by their behaviour. Yep. And sometimes that includes pets as well. I know of someone who had a dog, his hair was falling out, and the vet asked, is there anything going on at home? And she said, well, my husband's an alcoholic. And he said, that's it. And, it affects the whole family. And it certainly affected me and my relationship with my primary age children at that time. Yep. And I was angry and irritable all the time. Nothing was done. I lived in chaos. This was the whole thing. Living with an alcoholic for me meant that I lived in chaos. I never knew when my husband would come back, whether he'd be drunk, whether he would be in hospital. I often got a call from a hospital because he'd fallen over and ended up in the gutter, had to be sent to hospital, and I wouldn't know where he was. And so my life was filled with fear and anxiety, as well as anger. I was very angry that this man was not being the partner that I thought I'd married, and he certainly wasn't the father to my children. So but I couldn't do anything about it. But I didn't know that was in fact the case until I went to Al-Anon. My husband actually went on a rock bottom, and he went to AA. He tells me that I told him about AA and gave him the number, but I certainly don't remember that. But he did go to AA. Yeah. He was on the point of suicide, and he went. And I thought if ever he stopped drinking, I would be fine, because I was fine. I didn't recognise that I'd been affected at all by it, and I would have argued with anybody who said anything else. But I do know now, looking back at my children suffered very much from my attitude and my behaviour, and the fact that I wasn't, they were fed and sent to school and that sort of thing, but I didn't take care of their emotional needs to the extent that there were times when I worried so much. I was full of anxiety. I woke up in the morning with palpitations. I couldn't open the post. And there were times when I just sent my children upstairs to play because they got in the way of my worrying.
Maureen, how are you now?
Oh, I'm much better now because I've been in Al-Anon for quite some time. Yeah. My husband's a recovering alcoholic in AA. Brilliant. And our lives have become wonderful. I mean, my children have grown up now, and we're very close to them because I have gone to Al-Anon, and the reason I went to Al-Anon, and the reason I went back, was that these people in the room, who all had the same thing that I had, they were living with an alcoholic or had lived, they had something I didn't have, and that was peace. I recognised in the room these people understood what I was going through. Yep. And I understood them, and they understood me, and I had never experienced that because I never told anybody what my home life was like.
No, I can imagine, because it's a secret. You keep the secret to yourself, don't you? Because you don't want anybody else knowing.
People, and if you do say something, I've heard other people say, "Yes, I told my friend." I said, "Well, why do you put up with it?" It's an emotional thing. It's a journey into alcoholism, and you're caught in this terrible family dynamic